Welcome back. The EU is currently considering amendments to the Tobacco Products Directive, which includes regulating the ingredients used in tobacco products. Now, the proposed regulations are threatening the jobs of more than 850,000 burley leaf tobacco farmers in Europe, Africa and the United States. So let's unpack this further. Francois van der Merwe, President of the International Tobacco Growers Association, with us in studio to take a closer look at tobacco. Thanks for joining us today, Francois. So this is an example of how Brussels and laws that are passed there affects the likes of Lilongwe in Malawi and capitals in Africa right now, and certainly key economies in Africa when it comes to those that grow tobacco. But tell us about the changes that they're proposing right now.
Exactly, Samantha. Your summary is spot on, and thank you for having me. It's Brussels trying to dictate to other parts of the world, including Africa, United States, Brazil. But let's start right in Europe. There's 80% of tobacco produced in the EU is Oriental or burley tobacco. 9,000 growers in Poland, Italy, Spain, France and Bulgaria. The tobacco crop is worth 560 million euros in the EU. So what will those parliamentarians tell the manufacturers and the farmers in those countries if they ban ingredients? And the effect of ingredients ban means that traditionally US blended cigarettes can't be manufactured anymore. Blended cigarettes is just what it means. It's made up of a blend of different varieties of tobacco: Virginia, flue-cured, burley tobacco and Oriental. And because burley tobacco is a bit harsher in tastes and so on, it needs to be additives needs to be added. It's like winemaking to give it a characteristic taste, to replace sugars that are lost during the long curing process. And some of the ingredients have technological purposes, you know. So like controlling the burn rate, acting as binders and fillers, controlling the moisture, preventing the tobacco from degrading.
So what is the ultimate rationale behind trying to push this regulation through? Because if I understand it correctly, it's just 7 members of the 766-member parliament that is wanting to push this specific legislation through. But what's their rationale?
Samantha, this is unfortunately a classical example of how tobacco regulation is made all around the world. A small group of people, bureaucrats sitting in air-conditioned offices in either Geneva or in Brussels or wherever, think they can rid the world of smoking and the harmful effects of smoking by drafting extreme regulations. Like this is a classical example of extreme regulations. Not evidence-based, not thinking it through properly, and most importantly, not consulting with a wide range of stakeholders, including tobacco manufacturers and especially tobacco farmers, because the impact will be on the sector. And if you look at the contribution that the sector is making all around the world, this is nonsensical.
In terms of the farmers, let's talk from an African perspective right now. I mean, how many exporters are, I mean, we know Malawi, Mozambique, but overall, how many nations export to the EU?
90% of the burley produced in the EU is sold in the EU. So most European countries have some financial difficulty. So how will they explain to those people and to the manufacturers if their markets are taken away? 4,500 burley tobacco growers in the US, of which half of that crop is sold in the EU. In Africa, we have 2 major burley producing countries, Malawi and Mozambique. In Malawi, which is one of the least developed countries in the world, 60% of their exports comes from tobacco, 15% of GDP comes from tobacco, 750,000 farmers, 1.4 million jobs, 5 million dependents. More than half of that is sold in the EU. In Mozambique, 100,000 farmers, and the contribution in a faraway province like that, where the tobacco is, there's infrastructure, there's schools, there's clinics, there's clean drinking water, all built around tobacco. So what will the EU tell the farmers in Mozambique if they decimate and take away their livelihoods by drafting extreme regulations which are not thought through? No consultation took place. There's no evidence behind or science behind this. What will they tell these farmers?
Ultimately saying that the cigarettes will be better for you if they don't have these blended products? Is that the kind of reasoning behind trying to exclude those blended products?
Yes, well, they think the simple thing is a health benefit. They think if they ban the ingredients, cigarettes will be less attractive. But smokers will have a choice. If blended cigarettes cannot be manufactured anymore, smokers have 2 choices. Either they move to Virginia-style cigarettes, which is about 50% consumption of the world, or if they still demand blended cigarettes, it will be manufactured on the black market. So we will just enhance the illicit trade, which is already 10 to 12% of the global market, which will be unregulated, uncontrolled, and manufactured in backyard factories without any control. Legal cigarettes are manufactured in legal, state-of-the-art, compliant factories.
Before we wrap this up, I mean, you're a tobacco man. You've spent the majority of your career representing those in the tobacco industry. So how do you think that the world's view when it comes to smoking bans, more regulation, it's coming at all angles from the authorities, is going to affect countries like Malawi and Mozambique? Do they also understand the threat that it could have to their economies?
Everybody in the tobacco sector accepts that we produce a harmful product. Therefore, it needs to be regulated and consumption needs to decline over time. The world needs to accept the realities of tobacco, the economic contributions, the harmful effects of tobacco.
But I'm talking about Africa specifically.
And in Africa specifically.
How will this affect these economies, and do they recognize the threat?
Well, if you take tobacco out of Malawi, there is no Malawi. If you take tobacco out of Mozambique, Mozambique will be on its knees. If you take tobacco out of Zimbabwe, 65,000 farmers, huge industry, no Zimbabwe. If you take tobacco out of Zambia, Tanzania, 100,000 farmers, Zambia, 30,000 farmers, in South Africa, 16 million kilograms. If you take tobacco out of Africa, Africa will be a poor place, and there will be no health benefit because the tobacco will be produced elsewhere, the cigarettes will be produced elsewhere. So we need to address this in a holistic way, in a mature way, non-emotional. Consult with the tobacco sector if you want to make regulations that will impact on them and at the same time achieve your health objectives, which we support, by the way.
Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Samantha.
Francois van der Merwe, President of the International Tobacco Growers Association.